Respect me as a patient, respect my beliefs, and take into consideration that halal is going to be a big part of my decision.
Assalamualaikum. Hi, I'm Rozi Osman, and welcome to KiniHalal's talk show. Let's discuss in this episode, is the Halal Pharma wave coming? Let's now welcome my former boss, my mentor, Leonard Ariff Abdul Satar, the Group Managing Director of Duopharma Biotech Berhad. Leonard, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rosie. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I'm used to Duopharma, right? You know, we've been together for more than 20 years in this company, and you know, we've developed Halal Pharma together. So, but the audience out there may not know Duopharma, right? So, why don't you start first introducing Duopharma and your initiative in the halal pharmaceuticals to the audience?
Okay, thank you very much, Rosie. As much as I would like to say it was my initiative, it was started even before I was involved in pharmaceuticals within the group as it was then. A lot of work went in back in 1998. Now, what was the big difference at the time was the company wanted to set up a soft gel manufacturing facility. And in order to, and this was the first soft gel manufacturing facility in Malaysia. And it was decided it was an ideal opportunity for us to review what was happening within the soft gel market and how to make sure that whatever product that the company produced at that stage would be acceptable to the widest community. So we already had the halal certification for food, etc. And we decided to extend it because we knew there were question marks people had opposite gelatin, especially. So that was a time where a conscious decision was made by the management of the company at the time to invest in not only the soft gel facility, but also to invest in a halal soft gel facility. So that was the starting where we first started getting involved. And there were no standards in Malaysia at the time. You know, the only standards that were available were the food standards. So as you mentioned just now, we got our first certification a year later. But it was certified under food. Okay, we have some major consumer healthcare brands like Champs. At the time, it was Flavets, Proviton, etc. So we took the opportunity to focus at that stage in getting our consumer healthcare range, and that has progressed over time. So today, Duopharma is the largest supplier of consumer healthcare within the vitamin minerals subsector. And we continue focusing on halal, which we have since 1998. And we're very happy to have been the first company that was actually approved under the Malaysian Halal MS 2424 pharmaceutical standards. When you want to embark on a journey like this, the first challenge is always internal rather than external. And it was to convince the stakeholders within the company that it was a viable way forward. And to extend it beyond just the consumer healthcare, but to include medicines as well. So after starting it off internally, we got over that hurdle. Then the next hurdle was to do the regulatory side, but at that time the regulatory side was primarily the JAKIM certification, which, as you said, was food at the time. So we had to convince them that to treat consumer healthcare like food as well. Then the third hurdle was then to how do we communicate the message to the masses, because we were very sensitive about the fact that obviously from our perspective, investments in soft gel and halal certification would resonate well among the Muslim community. But we wanted the message to resonate not just within the Muslim community, but the general populace as well. We wanted to ensure that taking a Duopharma multivite as an example, people were confident, not just in terms of its efficacy, etc., but also in terms of the process and the raw materials that go into the product. So a lot of effort we've spent, especially in the last 10 years or so, is educating the public. receiving feedback from the public to make sure that we are in consonant with what the market demands as well. And of course, over time, the standards has been evolving. And we've been heavily involved. Duopharma was heavily involved right at the beginning when the first standards were created, but we've continued being involved even with the evolution of the standards. And I think it's heartening to hear about your previous session with MPRA, because we've always found that the MPRA and other stakeholders, whether it's the regulatory authorities, the religious authorities, or the academics, we've all had the same end game in mind. It's just the process might differ a little bit between the various stakeholders.
So that convergence of mind of Sharia, science and business, who should lead that convergence? You know, would you be able to lead it so that you know, you can move forward faster?
Okay. I think the starting point in halal certification is always the certification in itself, the quality of that certification. We've heard horror stories about certifications in other countries around the world. Malaysia is one of the few countries in the world where the certification body is actually independent of industry. And that, I think, adds a lot of credence to the halal certification that's issued by JAKIM. That's, in fact, if you ask me, the reason why the JAKIM halal certification is so well accepted globally. The issue we have, I think, as a business is always about certainty and consistency. So again, it's heartening to hear about MPRA on a working group with the OIC to try to develop a common standard across the industry. Because I think until and such time a common standard for definition of halal certification is established, it's very difficult for halal in pharmaceutical to go mainstream. You know, because you can't expect countries or producers to be having different definitions of halal depending on where they're manufacturing. So the harmonization is extremely key. But so far it's been very good. So the quality of the JAKIM certification, that has to be paramount. But it's an ecosystem. It's not one group leading another. It's all groups working in consonant together to make sure that with a similar end game. I think when it comes to whether it's business, whether it's the religious authorities, or whether it's the regulatory authorities, I think each has its own part to play. And I wouldn't describe as one having to lead the other. But I think it's all about maintaining the gold standard that the JAKIM halal certification enjoys globally at the moment.
Perhaps you can share with us, you know, I read recently about the Korean manufacturer, you know, has the halal certificate for the medicine, right? EPO. Yeah. So maybe that's from there you can share, you know, how is it that foreign country and foreign business adapt to the requirements of Malaysia's JAKIM?
Okay, thank you very much for that question, Rosie. Actually, that particular example highlights some of the issues that I highlighted just now about harmonization across geographies. We were the first company in Malaysia to do a clinical study for erythropoietin, which is a product that's used for renal patients, especially patients who are undergoing hemodialysis. And obviously, it's a product that is induced into the body by way of injection. So we already knew right at the beginning that there will be a subset of patients that will be concerned to ensure that the product that goes into their body is not just efficacious and made to a good quality. They wanted to ensure that it was in consonant with their religious beliefs as well. So we made sure at the point, right at the beginning, when we're looking at this product, we actually did an audit of the product to make sure that eventually it could actually meet halal guidelines in Malaysia. And as it progressed, the product was registered in Malaysia, but we had separate halal certification standards in Malaysia. You know, we have a particular standard. Whereas in Korea, the certifying authority, which is a private sector authority, which is recognized by JAKIM, they certified the product halal as per their understanding of it. And this is where science and the religious establishment have to, in a way, discuss issues, because science perpetually evolves. Okay? Religion doesn't evolve in so much as changes its basis. So it's looking for common grounds between the two. So we are now progressing to apply for halal certification under JAKIM for the same product in Korea. Because while it receives halal certification in Korea, it falls under the new guidelines in Malaysia, or the revised guidelines of MS 2424. So we have to understand that while the standards exist in order to support how halal is operated in Malaysia, and therefore you need authorities like Majlis Fatwa to determine certain things before then you can actually get halal certification for your products. So we are going through that process at the moment, and it's a lot of interaction between the religious authorities understanding the product, the scientists being able to explain the product. So we've actually gone so far as to bring the scientific advisor to the Majlis Fatwa to actually evaluate the product in Korea to make sure that the process meets the requirement in Malaysia for Malaysia to issue the halal certification. And when I talk about the gold standard just now, a lot of countries around the world watch JAKIM's halal certification because the moment they certify, there's a level of confidence globally that you may not get when its certification is provided by a private sector institute. And that's why I go back to what I'd say, that the biggest strength of halal in Malaysia is the quality of JAKIM certification itself.
Alhamdulillah. That's a very good point. And I like the stress that if you just don't put the business into that equation, it's science and the Sharia working separately, right?
It's a point. In some cases, an edict by the Fatwa Council is required by need as opposed to, in this case, a business. If you take, for example, the issue about blood transfusion, blood is a biological. So the Fatwa Council made a ruling regarding blood many years ago. So to say that the Fatwa hasn't looked at biological is not entirely correct. They have. But that was driven by need rather than by introduction of pharmaceuticals per se. What we are trying to do is to just bridge it and take it one step further and saying, if you can do it for biologicals when it comes to blood, why not for other biologicals, which are products that are needed by the Malaysian population or the global population for that matter.
So, Leonard, you mentioned we started the soft gel in 1998 and then got certified in 1999, then, all the journeys. So that means we are like 21, going to be 22, past the voting age if you are a human. Do you think it's a long journey already?
It will continually be a long journey, Rosie. I think it's important to realize when we first started, it was for one indication or one dosage form, which was soft gel. Then we moved to tablets, then we moved to injectables, now we're moving to biologicals. Science doesn't stay still. So it will be a continuing journey, and I doubt very much we'll ever get to an end point. What we're hoping for ultimately is for producers internationally, because remember, as Duopharma, we are a generic manufacturer. We can only manufacture products post-patent. Yes. Okay, so the product is in the market for 20 years before we're able to make a halal alternative. What we've always indicated, if somebody asked me about what's Duopharma's indication and why we spend a lot in terms of outreach programs, etc., is partially educating, because the more that the Muslim population demands halal alternatives, then you're going to find that multinational companies will take it into consideration at the point they develop a drug. Rather, because some of the resistance or pushback you're finding is because they've already decided on their formulation, they've already decided on their manufacturing process. So I think it's very key that as Muslims demand it, Muslims make a large percentage of the global population, and if you're vocal about your demands, then you will find that there will be more products that will be under patent, which means Duopharma cannot manufacture it, but at least made by manufacturers sensitive to the needs of Muslim community.
You mentioned about vocal demand, and you know, when the issue about vaccines and halal, isn't that vocal enough?
I mean, the issue with vaccines is two parts. You've got the anti-vaxxers, irrespective whether it's halal or not. Then you've got those who question about the halal vaccine. Okay, I think it's important for people to realize that before a product is actually released in a market, especially in Malaysia, it goes through a stringent safety check by MPRA, who are the regulatory body. So one of the major considerations are things like side effects, etc. So I don't think there are grounds for people to stand on when it comes to the anti-vaxxers. But the group, I think, within the consumer side that questions about the need for a halal alternative to a vaccine, that I think is a viable objection to make. And we've seen, without naming company names, where you even have vaccines that are created out of secretions of canine or dog liver, for instance, as one particular vaccine which is not being sold in Malaysia. But if you speak to that multinational, they would tell you that they developed it and didn't even think about it. And this is the problem. I think what we're trying to do, and you were involved in this activity many years ago, is we're trying to give consumer and patients the concept of informed choice. There are products that, because science has not developed a halal alternative, but are life-saving. And then for that, you have to fall back on religious teachings about the preserving life. You know, it is very, very key. But as we move forward, more and more products are starting to develop halal alternatives. But it's an end game for Duopharma that we only participate at the back end, which is after the patent expiries. Where we need Muslims to be vocal in their demand is for new drugs coming onto the market that are patented, that take into consideration that if you as a manufacturer want me as a patient to take your drug long term, then respect me as a patient, respect my beliefs, and take into consideration that halal is going to be a big part of my decision as you're taking the thing.
Respect.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be mutual respect on both sides.
So, the million-dollar question: if and when the wave starts, are you ready to still sustain your leadership?
Okay, we are ready insofar as all products that are manufactured in our facility are halal. Whether you're talking about consumer healthcare products, the products that you can buy off the shelf, or when it comes to medicines as well. The factory itself operates on the premise that every product we put through production has to be halal, and it's built in. We don't test for halal at the end. You know, every step of the way is evaluated. The raw materials are evaluated, the excipients are evaluated, the process is reviewed, etc. So from that perspective, we are ready for when the wave comes. In terms of capacity, I think we continue having lots of available capacity. So if we have to ramp up production because of a massive demand in halal products, we are able to do so. But we are a small producer on a global scale. You know, when we started on this journey of halal certification, one of the premises we always operated under was, one, that we will make halal products as widely available in Malaysia as possible. Two, as a consumer, you should not pay extra because the product is halal. Yes. Right? So it's very key for us, because that gives you an indication that the process itself has been designed to make sure the outcome is halal, as opposed to just testing at the end. And thirdly, and this is probably most importantly, that we're prepared to teach or companies, and we've done so in terms of, we've had visitations from student bodies, we've had visits from international institutions, we've had visits from the religious authorities in Malaysia, the Mufti Mufti of Wilayah, who's currently the Minister of Religion in Malaysia. We've had the Mufti of Terengganu and a few other Muftis visit our facility. The whole idea is educating, because we realize Duopharma alone is not going to be sufficient to drive the market to change. It has to be a concerted effort on multi-stakeholder level. And, you know, we've had instances, I mean, I remember when we were the first company with halal certified consumer healthcare. Then 10 years later, somebody else got certification. And to me, it wasn't about competition. It was actually good, because the more companies that actually adopted halal, the more mainstream halal becomes. So are we ready? Yes, we're ready to the best of our ability. But we're hoping beyond what Duopharma is able to do, that halal becomes more mainstream in pharmaceuticals like it has in food, as opposed to being seen as an aberration.
Now people are talking about SDG, sustainability development goals, and I see that Duopharma is converging them. So in a way, it's an exemplary of a good Islamic practice, right? So how can you further that? So I guess that is your one up, your value add, your Kaizen initiative to just still be ahead and ahead and ahead?
Yeah, I mean, we have tried to look at the fact that sustainability as a concept has always been around in Islamic business thinking. It's not new, okay, but it's become flavor of the month nowadays. And we were practicing sustainability in one form or another back in the 70s and the 80s, okay, because our background was also a multinational background within Duopharma. And we see the initiative being on halal, as I said, it goes beyond just the product. It has to be all-encompassing, and it adds to the sustainability of Duopharma into the longer term, because we think it's as demand, because especially when you talk about consumer healthcare, it constitutes 20% of our business. It's a very large portion of our business, and you can't have a viable consumer healthcare business without considering halal as a component, especially in Malaysia, when you're talking about 60% of the population are Muslims and would have a nascent demand for halal products. So from a sustainability perspective, Duopharma was recently included in the FTSE4Good index by Bursa, which is, kudos to the team who were very good about making sure that we met the requirements. As a public listed company, we are still considered small. Market capitalization is just over $1 billion, but we have been consciously producing our sustainability report on a constant basis every year, where we are quite transparent about what the activities that we do, as much as we're transparent about our halal activities as well. Because I think respect for environment, respect for a lot of the components within sustainability is in line with what I believe to be Islamic teachings as well. So this is one way where we hope to continue with our journey within halal. As I said, it's getting to the point where it's beyond just halal products. It's permeating into the way that we manage the company, in terms of how we treat our people, how we treat the environment, and how we treat our communities that operate around us as well.
Very insightful, Leonard. Thank you very much for being here with me. And it was great discussing with you again. Always great. A pleasure to learn, unlearn, and relearn things with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rozi.
So that's all that we have today. And I hope that you stay tuned in Kini Halal, and we'll meet again soon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and have a good day.